is the Sensitive CEO Show, igniting sensitive entrepreneurs to grow your heart-centered business. I'm your host, Rose Cox, and this podcast shares with you inspiring and thought-provoking conversations for sensitive entrepreneurs wanting to grow a sustainable online business in a way that feels exciting and aligned with your soul. Along with my carefully curated expert guests, we share science-backed advice, proven strategies, and the systems we use to succeed in our businesses and our lives as highly sensitives, introverts, and empaths. And by the way, if you would like to be updated on when each episode is released, feel free to subscribe to the short and sweet newsletter. You'll also get weekly recommendations and tips, especially for HSPs, empaths, and introverts. To subscribe, pop on over to the website sensitiveceo.show or rosecox.com/pod. Now on to today's show. Hey, it's Rose and welcome to another episode of the Sensitive CEO Show. And in this week's episode, I'm very excited to introduce you to Jennifer Moore. Jennifer supports intuitives, light workers, and creatives to use their abilities for good. And she's passionate about helping highly sensitive, empathic women. So welcome, Jennifer. It's lovely to talk with you today.
Oh, Rose, thank you so much for having me here today. And it's really a delight to connect with you.
And you too. Before we hit record, I was sharing with you that I just had a quick look at your book on Amazon and it looks amazing. And that is what we're talking about today. So your book is 5 Steps to Empathic Mastery, a 5-step system to go from emotional hot mess to thriving success. I mean, how cool is that?
Yes. And I can definitely speak from a former hot mess. And pretty much everything in the book is stuff that I have learned through trial and error. And it is the way I think about this book is that I think of it as a love letter that I wrote to my younger self and hopefully to my future incarnation that can find this book early on in her life so she doesn't have to go through the trials and errors that I went through last time.
Oh, wow.
Or this time. Yeah.
I love that you're thinking of your future incarnation already. That's very organized.
Yes. I'm a Capricorn with Virgo rising, so I am very organized.
Oh, I'm a Capricorn too.
Oh, Capricorns unite.
Yes.
And Capricorns rule, but we have we have the humility to not say that, like certain other zodiac signs that claim to be leaders.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So before we dive into your book and the 5 steps, I have a personal question I'd love to ask you is what led you to write the book?
So before I go into that, one of the things I would actually like to define, and that may help, is the definition for me as what is an empath. Because, it's a word that's getting thrown around a lot right now. And a lot of people identify as empaths. A lot of people, I'm an empath. And so I just want to be sure that you and I and the audience are all on the same page. So for me, an empath is a being, not just a human, but a being who picks up the thoughts, the feelings, the energy, and the sensations from the world. Sometimes it's from the world around them, but sometimes it's from across the globe. It could be you're in Australia, but you're feeling what's going on in Ukraine. I'm in America, but I'm feeling what's going on in Ukraine. The thing that is different about an empath than somebody with other kinds of extrasensory perception, like a medium or a psychic or somebody with one of the clairs or many of the clairs, or somebody with a lot of intuition, is that empaths process all the information that is coming to them through their own sensory and emotional and mental filters. And we process the information as if it is our own. And so the reason that I wanted to share this first is because one of the really big challenges of being an empath is that we feel intensely. And because we process things as if it's our own, we often think that the problem is us. We often think that we're the one going through this and there must be something wrong because all of a sudden we're feeling really anxious or we're feeling really sad or we're feeling really angry. And I will say that in the years that I have been working with other empaths and interviewing other empaths for my podcast, which is called the Empathic Mastery Show, and just being on podcasts like this and just everywhere, I have met one highly sensitive empath who has not had the experience of being told as children that they were too sensitive, that they were overreacting, that they were taking things too personally, that they just needed to suck it up and get over it. And like I said, one person I know who did not have that experience. Everybody else, like the hundreds, if not thousands of empaths thousands of empaths that I've talked to, we all have had the experience of being kind of gaslit for having the feelings that we have. So I really thought as a small child, picking up all the thoughts, the feelings, the energy, the sensations that were going on in the world around me, that there was something wrong with me. I was told that I had an overactive imagination, that I was too sensitive, and that I just needed to develop a tougher skin. And it wasn't until I started to do some real personal work on dealing with, in many ways, kind of the impact of being highly sensitive, because I turned to sugar, especially as a way to self-soothe and as a way to kind of try to find my way through it. The problem with that is that it was not a great solution, and it ended up basically causing more problems than it solved. And so I ended up in recovery from an eating disorder and working on myself. And that started to lead me to working with a really great therapist who started to help me recognize that a lot of times when stuff was coming up, it was because I had been in contact with somebody who had been going through something, or I had experienced something, or there was an event that was like, often I'd be sensing an event and then a couple days later something would happen. And she was the first person who helped me to start recognizing how so much of this stuff that I was thinking was mine was actually coming from outside of myself. Mm-hmm. And when I started to recognize what was coming from outside of myself and be able to create some distance and some separation between me and all of the feelings that were coming up, that was a complete game changer for me. And so over the years, as I felt and experienced greater relief for myself, I am the kind of person I'm a Capricorn sun, but I'm Virgo rising. So being able to offer support, being able to be of service is a really big part of my makeup. Like it really, it's who I am. And in that ability to be of service, one of the things that really motivated me was having experienced relief. I know how hard it is to not feel good. I really wanted to offer solutions to other people. So I developed my chops as a healer. I first became a Reiki practitioner and trained in breath work and became a breath worker. I trained and studied. I have a master's degree in psychology and religion. And I also did a 2-year-long shamanic apprenticeship, as well as another body-centered spiritual healing, energy healing training, emotion code. But the modality I love the most is actually EFT, emotional freedom techniques. And I'm actually one of, a very small number of EFT master trainers for EFT International. So bottom line is I started to do this work and offer the work to other people. And the thing I kept finding was that so many of the people that I was working with were struggling with the same thing, thinking that they were responsible for all the feelings that they were feeling, thinking that they were the cause of the issues that were going on when they were actually highly sensitive and empathic. And so frequently the stuff that was affecting them was coming from an outside source. And so I had a realization many years ago talking with a client about what she had been experiencing. And I was like, oh, I really need to write a book about this. And the working title was originally The Care and Feeding of Your Psychic Self When Living in a Muggle World. And because I just could see how so many people who are highly sensitive are like, we expect ourselves to behave like and to experience the world the way, quote, the muggles do or the ordinary people do. But it's not the same. And the gaslighting that ends up happening to us, not necessarily because people are deliberately wanting to gaslight us, but because their perspective and experience is so different, can be so utterly debilitating. So that is a very long answer to the question of what motivated me to write this book, or how did I get started?
Oh, I love it. And I love all the modalities that you shared. The shamanic modality, wow, that is something I'm totally interested in. And I was reading your bio earlier that you are one of the international master trainers of EFT, which is wonderful. So do you have an academy where you teach other people?
So basically I actually teach virtually, and I do a very comprehensive level 1 and 2 professional EFT training once a year. I do the sort of the brass, the nuts and bolts of EFT. And that's going to be actually coming up. I don't know when this episode will be airing, but it's going to be coming up. The next round is coming up in April of 2023. And I absolutely love to teach EFT, and because it is one of the most remarkable tools. And for anybody who's not familiar with this term, the EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques. And the simplest way to describe it is to say that it's kind of like mental and emotional acupuncture without the needles. What's wonderful about it is that it is an incredibly gentle way to release the places in our bodies, our minds, our hearts, our souls, where we have stuck energy, where we're carrying around limiting beliefs, where we may be carrying congestion in our bodies that's causing us pain, as well as memories that are kind of replaying or in a tape loop for us. And the beautiful thing is, when applied effectively and very mindfully and using the techniques that EFT International teaches, you can address and clear really big stuff without having to go back through it or get dragged through the mud. And that's the thing I absolutely love about it. So I have sort of, I guess what I would say is sort of the Empathic Mastery Academy, which there's sort of different arms of what I offer, because I do a sort of, in the spring, I teach EFT, and in the fall, I run people through the 5 steps of empathic mastery. And to learn more, you can go to EFTinstruction.com for the EFT side of it. And for the empathic mastery side of it, that's empathicmasteryacademy.com. So so there we are.
Wonderful. Well, I'll pop those links. I'll make sure I've got those links and pop them.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
This episode, I just had a quick check, will be early April. So that's very good timing.
Very good timing, because the training is going to be starting on April 15th. So if people are interested, please reach out to me. Yeah.
Wonderful. So Jennifer, I'd love to dive into the 5-step system from your book.
Wonderful. Okay. Let me start. I'll start by explaining the 5 steps. So basically, and I'll first say that the reason I created 5 steps is that I often found that the solutions that I had been taught in my spiritual travels did not work for me. So often in the psychic development programs and the other sort of spiritual development, it's all about opening yourself up to receive more information. The thing is that most of us who are highly sensitive empaths, we're already getting too much information. So our issue is not about being receptive and being able to get information. It's about being able to process that information and know how to take care of ourselves. The other thing that I found was that a lot of times people would say things like, oh, just send love and light to it, or just put a ball of light up around yourself. The problem with just putting a ball of light up around yourself is the first course of action is that if you're already carrying around a lot of negativity or toxicity or stuff you've absorbed from other people, The problem with that is that then putting that ball of light up around you is kind of like putting like gasoline into a pressure cooker. It is, it's sort of like you got a problem in there already, and the ball of light is just going to actually amplify it, not reduce it. So what I discovered was that before we could start really protecting ourselves, we needed to do a couple things first. So the first step of empathic mastery is recognize. And that is all about recognizing first off, and recognize at first was just like, what's mine, what's not mine. But what I discovered is there's actually multiple steps to recognize. First, we actually have to recognize ourselves as an empath. We have to recognize that we are sensitive and own that identity and give ourselves some grace that we don't experience the world the same way that a lot of other people do. Once we recognize that, then we need to recognize our defaults. We need to recognize what we feel like when we're feeling, quote, normal, unquote, or when we're at our own personal baseline, so that we can recognize when we are not at our baseline, when something is feeling out of sorts, when something is feeling weird, when something is feeling different. And so that's sort of that idea of being able to first recognize ourselves and then recognize when we don't feel like ourselves, when we feel wonky, when we feel off kilter, we feel out of sorts. And then once we know, oh, I feel different, I feel kind of like maybe I'm picking something up, then what we do is we start working on the recognizing of what's mine, what's not mine. And so I really love to do a really simple exercise, which is when I notice I'm feeling off, I'll put my hands over my heart and I'll take a deep breath, and I'll usually close my eyes and kind of lean into my heart. And I ask the question, is this mine? And I will say that pretty much like 9.9 times out of 10, the answer is yes, and that some of it is mine, some of it is coming from my own history, my own memories, my own stuff, but also other parts of it are coming from outside of me. And so once I have that sense of like, yes, this is only yours, or no, yes, this is coming from outside of you, but like I said, most of the times it's a little bit of both, I will then ask the question, what is mine? What is not mine? And from that, then we can start looking at, where is this coming from? What is this really about? Because there are so many different places and ways that information can be coming to us. It can be coming to us, there's like the whole time and space spectrum, as well as, sort of like from very, very personal to global, or actually galactic. So it's really, it recognizes is a very nuanced thing. But at first it's just like, oh, I'm feeling something. The second step is release. And release is all about letting go of that which no longer serves us. And that is where I do a lot of work with EFT. That is where I do a lot of work with other modalities. And really, how do we learn to reboot ourselves? How do we learn to let go of the stuff that is no longer serving us? How do we relax ourselves? And right now, I think as a civilization, many of us, especially, 3 years into a global pandemic, many of us, and regardless of where any of us fall in terms of our perspective about it or belief in it or anything, I think all of us can acknowledge that it has been a phenomenon that has affected pretty much everybody on the planet. And this has been a very stressful time for many of us on this planet. And so as a result of that, I think that many, many, many people have experienced, either are very aware that their nervous system is even more dysregulated than it was, or if they were lucky enough to have a regulated nervous system before, have experienced their nervous system getting very dysregulated. So release is not only about letting go of the stuff that no longer serves us, but it's also about regulating a dysregulated nervous system and bringing us back to a state of equilibrium, back to a state of grace. And for some of us, this may not be from this lifetime. Like, I did not personally experience a completely calm nervous system until I was in my early 50s. And I just turned 60 on Christmas Day. So I've been at this for a little while, but I had a very anxious mother who was very high strung, and I picked up her anxiety in utero. And so my nervous system came into this world hijacked and very, very like sent off. So the second step is release. The third step is protect. And that is where we start setting up and establishing better filters and shields energetically for ourselves, but also strategically for ourselves. Because having a ball of light or, a fluffed up aura is one thing, but having boundaries where we can say, no, I'm not going to do that is also a really important part of this. So protect is about creating filters and shields that protect us on an energetic level so that we're not as porous and absorbing things. But it's also about the choices that we make about what we will engage with and what we won't engage with. Because often empaths feel such a sense of urgency to rush in to rescue, to be responsible for other people, to people please, that we will often sort of throw ourselves under the bus. So protect can be as much about not going on Facebook at like 9:30 at night after a really long day where you're really tired. Can also be about when your drunk BFF or your crazy family member decides to send you a nutty text at 11:30 at night, not responding to it and trusting that this person or these people have resources in their life that are not us. And so protect for me, two things I really love to live by are the sayings. There's the Polish proverb, not my circus, not my monkeys. And so that's one that I really love to live with for my boundaries is like remembering like not my circus, not my monkeys, as well as something that I heard many years ago that I love and I live by is your poor planning does not constitute my emergency because empaths feel people's will, empaths feel people's desire, and empaths feel people's sense of urgency. And so as a result of that, often what happens is we feel like we need to do something when really it's not our responsibility and it's not our job. I've also noticed that for many of us as empaths, we feel if we have not done our own personal work on our own emotional issues, triggers, and pain, our pain will get stirred up when we're around other people's pain. We feel better when other people feel better. And so often what we will be doing is trying to go in and make things better or fix things because it just doesn't feel as awful to be around somebody who feels okay as it does to be around somebody who's going through a hard time, but especially if we've never learned how to hold space for discomfort within ourselves first and in other people on the other side. The fourth step, after we've done the protect and set up sort of more of these better boundaries, is connect, because the universe abhors a vacuum. And the thing is that if we just keep going through the first three cycles of recognize, release, protect, we will often continue to reattract and to recreate situations where we're drawing negativity back in. And so connect is about connecting with a power greater than ourselves, a force of goodness that is in the world, and filling ourselves up with positivity and sort of going towards joy as opposed to, and delight and wonder and amazement, as opposed to continuously focusing on the negative things. Because, if you've ever studied metaphysics and law of attraction, where our mind goes is what we manifest and what we amplify in our life. So when we are focusing on being in the divine, being in the light, being in that connection, then what we're doing is we're amplifying that. And it has this spectacular way of kind of like just shifting the whole game so that we are not worrying as much as we are just kind of living in the vibration of grace. So the fourth step is connect. And then the fifth step is act, because words without works is dead. If we do not take action, if we do not actually implement what we've learned, then we'll be sort of in, our egos might be sort of just thinking through all the things, but we're not going to embody it. We're not going to integrate it. And we're not necessarily going to live the life we're here to live. And so ACT is really about, how do I live in the world as a responsible empath? And in my experience, this often has a great deal to do with, how do we live impeccably? How do we live with integrity? And that, again, has to do with having ethics. That has to do with not just going in and probing somebody psychically because we can, not just going in and rushing in to rescue somebody or volunteering ourselves for something when somebody hasn't even asked us or given us consent or permission. So ACT is very much about, how do we live in the world in a way that is mindful, is respectful, is consensual, and is with a great deal of integrity. So those are the 5 steps of empathic mastery.
Oh, I love that. There's so much information that you've just shared there, Jennifer. Thank you. And it sounds like you've given us all your book, but I'm sure there's so much more in there to really dive.
Oh, believe me, there's so much more. So it's 380 pages. And, and then I just published for, not that the audience can see, but I'm holding up my newest book, Empathic Mastery Diary, my newest solo, which is a guided journal to live as the intuitive badass you're meant to be. And this is kind of like a workbook that leads you through 52 weeks of the year that really helps you to recognize, release, protect, connect, and act. And what I will say is that I've just given you the framework. The book will give you the how. The first part of the book is all about, what does it mean to be an empath? Why are we this way? I actually share some science behind it and talk about things like inherited family trauma and like all of the ways that we can be deeply impacted and why we are like this. And then the second half is each chapter is one of the 5 steps, and I take you through. But I don't just explain it in theory. I give you very solid tools. I explain how to use the tools. And I also have a gift, which is basically a mini course. It's not even a mini course. It's a course, but to get people started on really getting empathic mastery and the foundation of that kind of underneath them, so that they can really start making a difference and changes in their life. So even though I've definitely given a really good snapshot, the how is what this book is about.
Brilliant. And I'll pop all those links into the show notes, and the new diary looks amazing too. So look, I have so many more questions I want to ask, but we are already up for time. So I'm going to have to leave it there, unfortunately, but maybe you can come back on the show at some stage, Jennifer, and I
would be delighted to come back and have answer more questions, because it feels like we just got rolling. So,
yes, exactly.
Yes, whenever you'll have me, I will be here.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in to another episode. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Sensitive CEO Show. If you enjoyed this episode, or if you think it would be useful for someone else, please leave me a review on sensitiveceo.show. Just follow the prompt in the menu. Each month, I'm offering one lucky reviewer a chance to win a 1-hour business and mindset audit with me. This in-depth audit covers the 5 pillars of your online business, and you'll walk away with super clear action steps specifically for you and your business. You'll be re-energized and motivated to step into your greatness. You'll also find all of the show notes for each episode on the website sensitiveceo.show. And while you're there, make sure you subscribe to the short and sweet newsletter. You'll get weekly recommendations and tips, especially for HSPs, empaths, and introverts. And as the name implies, the email is short and sweet. The Sensitive CEO Show, igniting your sensitive superpowers.